Sounds good.
So I'd like to welcome everyone to Denby Dale Amateur Radio Club, and we're really pleased to see back in the chair here, Adrian KO8SCA Sierra Charlie Alpha. Adrian did come along and gave a talk to the club, many months ago now, about his DXpedition that he ran in Europe a few years ago, but also, of course, touched on the fact that he was part of the Bouvet Island DXpedition earlier this year. And we're really pleased that Adrian has agreed to come back and to give us his thoughts and tell us the tale really firsthand of Bouvet Island. So Adrian, I'm just going to hand the microphone over to you.
Well, good evening to you guys there, and good afternoon from here from New York. Thank you for having me. I will start my presentation about the 3 Yankee 0 Juliet. And let's dive right in. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. So as you all know, the 3 Yankee 0 Juliet, the expedition to Bouvet Island, which is the most remote uninhabited place on Earth, took place in January, February of this year, only a couple of months ago. And I'm here to tell you a few things about how things worked out and how this adventure unfolded for the team. Our website does have a lot more information and pictures, so if you have time, you can go to 3yankee0juliet.com. So, first of all, a few words about Bouvet, and specifically, where is this little island located? Well, it's in the middle of nowhere, and if you have a map and try to find it, you may have a hard time because it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere, far away from the shipping lanes. So if you want to go to Bouvet, you have to actually hire a boat to take you there because it's pretty far from the shipping lanes. So there's no specific boat that will just pass by and continue going somewhere else. The island is about 12,800 kilometers from the east coast of United States, and it's about the same distance to Europe, in particular to Oslo. It's about 16,000 kilometers to Tokyo, and so our Japanese ham operators will have had the longest path to Bouvet Island. The island is located to south of Cape Town, about 26 kilometers, and about 1,600 kilometers north of Antarctica. So it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere. You're not going to find any humans for at least 2,000 kilometers around the island. Well, although it's in the southern hemisphere, Bouvet Island is a Norwegian territory. It was discovered by a French sailor with which his last name was Bouvet in about 1700s, and he gave the island as the current name. But the Norwegians were the first to step on the island in 1927 and claimed it for the Norwegian crown. One of the reasons that Mr. Bouvet didn't actually step foot on the island is because the island is covered 93% by snow and ice, so it's not very hospitable. And not only that, about 300 stormy days a year are blasting the island, and some of these storms bring winds that could reach 100 miles an hour. The island is not too high, is about 780 meters at the highest peak, and it's basically a volcanic volcanic cone. And although the island is not too large, it's about half the size of the island of Manhattan. You can't really walk from one end to another because underneath the sheet of ice, there could be crevasses that are hidden, so those could be very dangerous. Bouvet is one of the 4 Norwegian overseas territories, which are of interest to ham operators because they are separate DXsca entities. The other three being Pirawan, Svalbard, and Jan Mayen. For those they are passionate about the IOTA program, Bouvet being an island that has the designation of Alpha November 002. Importantly, the island has no humans. It's a pretty harsh environment, so that basically explains it why there's no humans there. But supposedly there are about 5,000 penguins and 65,000 fur seals. And I'm not sure how they count those, but probably artificial intelligence and satellite mapping. Well, so far, there have been only 9 activations of Bouvet Island, according to Club Log. Most of the activations in the early 70s and 80s had provided very few QSOs. And the activation of 3 Yankee Zero Juliet, the expedition that happened in this year, in 2023, brought about 20,000 QSOs. And of very importance is that this is the first activation of Bouvet that was done with private funds. Most of the other activations were done using governmental funds, mostly technicians going to Bouvet to maintain or repair the weather station that's located on the island. Once the weather station was automated in the early 80s, the visits to Bouvet kind of stopped, and so Bouvet became pretty rare. The expedition that took place in December 1989 and January 1920 produced about 47,000 QSOs. And another large activation was in 2001 when Charles Brady, who was a Navy captain and a doctor, was on the island for almost 3 months. He made quite a few QSOs and mostly on SSB. Now, the first activation of Bouvet by a Norwegian team took place in 1977, and it's pictured there to the right. And the reason it's interesting for us from our point of view is that they landed in exactly the same spot where our DXpedition took place, and which is Cape Fear. To the left there is a picture taken in 1927 when Norwegians first stepped foot on Bouvet. Now, looking at the map of Bouvet, you can see the weather station at the top left. And this is, in a way, the flattest surface of the island, but in the same time is also part of the national park. And so as part of the landing permit, this was off limits for the expedition. As such, a new place needed to be found that will be convenient for us to land on. And consulting with the Norwegian Polar Institute and also with others that have visited Bouvet, including the 3 Yankee Zero Zulu attempt the expedition in 2018, we decided to choose as a landing spot the Cape Fear, which is pictured there at the bottom right of the map. And so you can't really tell by looking at this map if there's any actually landing spot, but we did have a lot of satellite pictures, and we were able and confident that this is going to be a good spot to land, as I will show later. The team leaders, Norwegian team leaders, Ken, Rune, and Erwin, put together a 12-team DXpedition made up of Norwegians, North Americans, Europeans from Germany, and also the team included 2 doctors, Dr. Bill and Dr. Mike, and also a dentist, Mr. Otis, a November Papa 4 Golf from Puerto Rico. Although we had the 2 doctors in the team, they really didn't have much to do as we returned with no issues and had no health issues while on Bouvet. But Mr. Otis did have to fix a tooth for one of the team members. Now, to go to the expedition such as this, um, the preparations took about almost 3 years. And last year in April, the team met in Norway and tested each and every piece of equipment to make sure they withstand the requirements of Bouvet. And also the team, some of the team members took climbing courses and also ice climbing courses just as a backup in case scaling the cliff of Cape Fear turned out to be complicated. And so we tested everything. As I said, we even tested the toilet while in Norway. And that's basically one of the requirements for our lending permit was that whatever we take on the island has to be taken off the island. And that included human waste. And that's quite significant for 9 people for 10 days. So we had a lot of challenges, and most of them were solved, and we'd be able to find solution. One of the things that we needed to be prepared on was a way to find sturdy and quality antennas that can withstand the strong winds on Bouvet Island. And so in January this year, we started our trip. The trip started in London, marked there as the step number 1. The reason we started the trip in London is because our boat was located in the Falkland Islands. And although you can go to the Falklands by flying different ways, one of the most convenient being flying from Chile. After COVID, a lot of flights become non-existent, got canceled, and one of the disadvantages of most of the flights that we found that could take the team from to the Falkland Islands was the fact that these airlines, in case the weather is not good on the Falklands, they will cancel the flight and move the passengers to the next flight, which is usually a week later. As such, we decided to take a Royal Air Force flight that flies for about 17 hours from London to the Falklands with a stopover in D4, the Cape Verde Islands in the Atlantic. The stopover is necessary for refueling, marked there with the stop number 2 on this map. And after that, we continue the flight to the Falklands, and from there, from the step number 3 and 4, we'll take the boat, and from Bouvet, we will continue to South Africa and Cape Town, and that was our journey. So the whole team has flown into London, where we were greeted by the UK hams, and so we had a nice farewell dinner. It was the first time the whole team and our consultant, the 13 member Peter, pictured there with no uniform, with at the top left picture. Our consultant Peter was hired to find the boat for us, to make sure the boat is exactly what we need, to speak to the captain of the boat and ensure that all our requirements are met, and if anything that needs to be adjusted has to happen before we arrived to the boat. And so he had a lot of work to do, and he was also the 13th member of our team that will design our landing approach, drive the Zodiac, and overall keep us safe in our journey. From London, we, as I said, we flown to Cape Verde. The flight left from the RAF airport, Norton, about 2 hours outside London, and we took another team picture at the bottom left there. And so on January 11, we left UK, and we landed the next day in Mount Pleasant Terminal in the Falkland Islands on January the 12th. Most of our equipment and bags were already in the Falklands. We have shipped a container sometime in November, and that container arrived in the Falklands at the beginning of November, where some of our ham radio friends in the Falklands check the container to make sure everything is okay and there's no issues. And so, but some of us needed to bring extra clothing, and we did have a lot of bags and some electronic equipment that some of the sponsors provided in the last minute. In the Falklands, our boat was waiting for us. The boat name was called Marama. It was a French boat with a French crew. It's a so-called ketch, about 30 meters long, has a aluminum hull, and it's the crew and the skipper are experienced. They're focused on the cold weather sailing expeditions for scientists and even tourists traveling Northwest Passage, South Georgia, Antarctica, and other regions of the globe. So the French crew was really expert in these type of cold area sailing. Our sailing trip took about 4 days. I'm sorry, 14 days from Port Stanley to the from Port Stanley in the Falklands to Bouvet, and then from Bouvet, the sailing time took about 10 days to Cape Town, South Africa. Now, these are sailing times, meaning that the journey itself took that long, but we did not leave Falkland Islands right away. We've been on the boat for a bit longer, and we had to stay around Bouvet for a bit longer than we expected. Now, loading the a sailing boat is quite a challenge. The sailing boats are not designed to carry a lot of stuff. We did have more than 7 tons of equipment, and so it took about 2 days to load each and every piece of equipment. We use these blue barrels that you see there. These barrels are waterproof, and they're floating, and we use them to carry a lot of sensitive equipment, including our radios and other electronics equipment. We did have a lot of containers to carry water and fuel, diesel fuel so that we can be self-sufficient on Bouvet for about 45 days. We hired a local guy to help us lift the heavy equipment, such as the generators, which were about 100 kilos in weight, so pretty significant. And one important thing about putting all these items on the boat, it was like a Lego game. And so each and every piece of equipment needed to be labeled, and we had a system and a computerized system that will tell us exactly where the location is of every item. The reason for that is the items loaded on the boat needed to be done in a specific succession, so that when we arrive at Bouvet, we take the items out of the boat in the exact order that's needed. In other words, you don't want to end up being on the island and carrying all the radio stuff first and not have enough water, or taking too much water but not enough food or fuel and so forth. So it was quite a bit of work. While the boat was refueled, we got off the boat and used the opportunity to visit the Port Stanley. One of the items that we're told that we have to visit was the historic dockyard museum. And the reason for that is because it has a specific or a separate dedicated section to amateur radio. So that was something interesting to visit. The Falklands have quite a bit of tradition when it comes to ham radio. After that, the ham radio operators from the Falklands who helped us with the loading process and helping us buy the latest, some of the latest supplies that we might needed, um, provided us with a nice dinner. It was supposed to be the last nice dinner before embarking on the long journey to the Falklands. I'm sorry, to Bouvet. So on January 17, we lifted the anchor. This picture, you see the team. At the bottom of the picture, at the top is the captain with the two crewmates. To the left is Nina, who was also our cook, and to his to the right of the picture is Charles, an impressive crew member. So in total, we were 3 crew members, our consultant, Peter, and the 12 members of the 3 Yankee 0 Juliet team. We lifted anchor at on January 17, destination Bouvet. Before going to this long journey, we had to go through all the safety procedures, which basically involved learning how to dress up into these safety gear. It's just not a simple process, and you have to be able to do it pretty quickly in case of emergency. We also had those safety harnesses pictured there at the top left. Those needed to be worn at all times when getting out on the deck of the boat. And considering this is a sailboat and involves a lot of movement, the boat moves quite a bit, and so being tied up to the boat was a requirement. We also had a lot of safety communication equipment that we used quite a bit, from cell phones to satellite radios provided by ICOM, and we use those to stay in touch with our pilots, who in turn put the information on Facebook and other social media channels. We also had the Starlink internet system, who worked impressively well, and it's probably going to be in the kit of every future DXpedition on the areas far away from civilization. We were able to have the Starlink working both in the Falklands but also around the Bouvet Island. The speeds are impressive, and so we're able to stay in touch with family and friends. Our crew member Nina, pictured there, the top left, in her little corner called the kitchen, prepared quite a few meals for us, and they were quite good. The French have quite a bit of food is in their DNA, so we had a lot of interesting meals. Sometimes, though, everyone on the boat got sick except for the crew and one of our team members. So a lot of times we actually avoided eating too much. The boat was full of equipment. They were see a picture of our salon at the bottom left there. See equipment everywhere. We had 5 bathrooms on the boat, and 2 of them were used as storage. I remember being very excited before the DXpedition because the boat had a sauna, and I thought I'm going to take advantage of that. But if you open up the door of the sauna, the equipment will start falling down. So we use that for storage as well. Again, putting 7 tons of equipment on a sailboat is not something that was designed. The bottom right, you can see a picture of how our living quarters look like. Basically, 2 people in a room, a top bed and a bottom bed, and then you had equipment everywhere, in the bathroom, under the bed, next to the bed, on the bed, near the bed, and so forth. But the quarters are pretty comfortable, so no complaints there. To keep busy, the captain of the boat required that each and every one of us would do deck watches, looking for icebergs mostly, and also driving the boat. We did that twice a day for about an hour and a half each time. Driving the boat is not that complicated. You can see there at the bottom left, the captain showing us how to do it. It's pretty simple once you get the hang of it. It was pretty nice. It was a good way to kill time. And also, when you're up on the deck, the cold air keeps you refreshed, and you actually don't get seasick at all. During the nights, the night watches were very cold and pretty tough to do, but at the same time, if you see the picture to the right, this is the skyline was pretty impressive. You could see a lot of stars, no light pollution there in the middle of the ocean. As expected, we didn't see anyone from the whole trip from the Falklands to the Cape Town. We absolutely saw no one, no other boat there. We did see a lot of whales and other marine life, lots of birds, but no other ship. At the top left, you can see a scheduling for the watches from the boat. And during the day, we got together in the saloon and talked about anything and everything. After about a week, everybody knew everybody's stories, and when you hear them repeating, then you just go in your bunk, watch movies or read books or whatever. But life was pretty slow on a boat, and so about a week or so during the voyage, once we passed the South Sandwich Islands, the captain gave us permission to put an inverted V from the one of the masts of the boat, and we have made about 5,600 QSOs as maritime mobile with our own call signs. It was a very fun time. It was very interesting, and there was no noise. And 100 watts that we run was enough to make QSOs and enjoy it a little bit. One of our team members, Erwan, spoke French very well. So he's shown there at the bottom right, trying to explain one of the crew members, Charles, what this is all about. It was kind of hard for him to figure out what this 5.9 is. And it started to be a joke, you know, whenever he wanted our attention, he would say 599 or 5.9. So we did have a bit of a time. And so on January 30th, after about 14 days at sea, the captain told us we arrived at Bouvet. And so we went on the deck. It was night. We couldn't see anything. So we went back to sleep. In the morning, we woke up. Weather was not too friendly. It was pretty foggy and windy, and we started preparations for landing. A few hours later, the weather was incredible. The sun came out, and we were able to take these fantastic pictures that we see here. These times when you can take a picture that would look like this are very few. So that's in response to one of the questions that we get constantly. How come you guys say the weather on Bouvet is bad, and looking at these pictures, it looks a little bit like Hawaii weather? Well, so we were very anxious to land. The idea was to land on that beach shown there in the picture on the right, and then climb the cliff on the left and set up the camp somewhere there on the cliff. And so a scouting mission was organized, 1 Zodiac and 4 people. on morning of January 31st, 2023. The idea is for these 4 people to go ashore, identify the best landing part of the beach, and then set up a way to, or figure out the best way to go up the cliff. And so the 4 people, the first landing on Bouvet took place on January 31st. The 4 people got there and installed a ladder. This was one of the good surprises that Bouvet had for us, in a sense that the weather changed the way the cliff was shaped. And so we put that ladder onto that cliff, and about 3-meter high. And after that, you just walk to the, for about maybe 100 meters to the future campsite. This was, like I said, a good surprise, because this way we didn't need to use any of the climbing gear. We did not need to do any ice climbing either. So once landing was done, the 4 members started to identify a good spot for putting up the tent, the camp, and the antennas, and so forth. Unfortunately, the weather changed, and a few hours later, they realized they cannot get back onto the boat, and so they had to find a spot where to stay overnight while the bad weather changes. And so with a little tent, they put that little tent into a ravine, and the next day the weather was bad. On the second day, we were able to send some supplies, some additional supplies. And during the process, one of the tents, one of the 3 tents that we were planning to bring on the island, got lost in the sea because of the high surf. And then more attempts have been done to get them off, the 4 people off the island. And then that we were finally successful on the first on the 4th day. And so on the 4th day, we were able to bring the 4 people back onto the boat for a report and find the best solution to get back on Bouvet. And we all got together on a saloon of the boat, as this picture here in the middle. And we were discussing and see what the best approach is to get on the island. The going by zodiac was a bit difficult. One approach was to wait until the weather is good enough and use the zodiac, or use the available weather, which is so-so from our point of view, and use one of our backup options, which was using a closed loop system with a very heavy rope, pictured on the top left and top right. And so our consultant said that this is a more difficult approach, but to set up, but it will make it a lot easier for the team and the equipment to get on Bouvet than doing it by Zodiac. And so our consultant Peter, showed there on the right, on the top picture, used the Zodiac and then swim to the shore and created this 4-point loop system by drilling into the rock. So 2 points onto the island, on 2 rocks on the island, and 2 points made up by 2 buoys in the ocean. And so he tested the loop, and following his instructions, we planned our landing, the second landing on Bouvet. The caveat for this was that in the first run, we needed at least 6 people. And so in the end, out of the 12 operators, 8 went on the island and 4 stayed on the boat. The idea was that the 4 people on the boat will help with the unloading of the boat and loading the Zodiac. And also, we're gonna wait for a few days until the weather got better to bring more supplies and more people on the island. And so 19 members and 1,500 pounds of equipment got landed on Bouvet. This the picture at the bottom right shows some of the happy team members once they got on the shore. We by using this rope system. The caveat was that although we didn't have to wait for perfect weather, we could not use the system to unload the whole 7 tons of equipment. So we needed to do a minimal approach, and that was just 2 radios, no comfort, meaning no chairs, no desks, and just 1 tent, and the minimum supplies to survive on the island for a couple of weeks, including fuel and water. I'm going to play a little video here showing the landing on Bouvet using this closed loop system. The main issue with the landing by the Zodiac would have been the fact that unless the weather is good enough, the surf is too strong, and carrying heavy equipment would be dangerous. So as a safety measure, a safetier approach would have been to do this loop system. The idea is that you have a safety harness, you hook up into the rope, and then you swim towards the shore for about maybe 100 meters. You swim, but the surf will push you a little bit. And in addition, the people that are already on the island would pull the rope and help you get to the shore faster. The surf is very strong. You can see there that some of the team members, once they arrive close to the shore, the surf is so strong that it's hard to get on your 2 feet until you get very, very close to the beach. You can see there Marama on the horizon, staying safely there and waiting for word from us of our successful landing. Is Ken the team leader? So once we got on Bouvet, we had started to set up our tent. So that was quite difficult in the sense that our staging in Norway got us installing the tent in less than an hour. It took quite a few hours to put up a tent in the heavy winds on Bouvet. Again, these pictures are a bit misleading. Very few times on Bouvet when the wind stops blowing and the weather is this nice. We put a lot of effort in putting the tent, and then we used a lot of heavy rope, mountaineering rope, and then we drill into the rock to put additional anchors. And so it seemed that we did a very good job because we're the next day after landing, we're expecting a storm, and so we wanted to make sure we're prepared. It rained quite a bit, and we hated that because getting wet is not nice when the weather is cold. So a few times we did get some snow, and those were better times than even though it's a bit colder. We had to anchor every piece of equipment. You see there at the bottom right. Anything that was not tied down, it will fly very easily. and so everything had to be tied up. In the bottom left, you see a tarp, a blue tarp. Under there, we have our operator bags. Those needed to be secured as well. We could not keep anything, um, just sleeping bags and minimum amount of gear inside the tent, because we're 9 people in a tent designed for a lot less than that. But the tents are very good quality. They were designed by a Norwegian company that there was quite professional in designing these type of gear for the Norwegians that spend a lot of time in the Arctic. Life in the tent was not really a 5-star hotel. We put our sleeping bags on the floor around the heating stove. We used that heating stove quite intensely in the first day to warm up, but that's not a good idea. Although we had a lot of fuel, we decided the second day to stop using the heating system because overnight it produced a lot of condensation, so a lot of our clothing and gear got wet. So subsequent days, we would use the heating just to um, dry up our clothes or other small items, and also to boil the water that was necessary for preparing the food. The system was so in the next day, few days on, we didn't use the heating system too intensely, and the temperature inside the tent was sometimes similar to the one outside the tent. But the system was pretty simple. Once you're cold, you go inside, you go inside your sleeping bag. It will take about half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. You warm up, and then you go back to your chores on Bouvet, either fixing something or preparing a meal or operating. The the picture on the right shows our toilet. It was quite a challenge to use it. Basically, you sit in a tent, and sometimes you say, okay, maybe I'll hold it and wait for good weather, and then I'll go use the toilet. And then after a while, you see the sun coming up for a few minutes, you dress up, which usually takes 10 to 15 minutes to put all the um, heavy clothing on you. By the time you get to the toilet, the weather changes again, but you're like, okay, I already have my pants down. You know what? I'll do whatever it have to take, and we will use the toilet. I remember we had to take out all the human waste after the DXpedition, and so we came prepared to do so. The meals were pretty simple. They were the so-called MREs. That's basically meals ready to eat. A small plastic envelope that you open up, you pour hot water, you stir for about 5 minutes, and you have some meals with some fancy names like pasta bolognese or pasta primavera, and they're pretty delicious if you avoid looking at it. While on Bouvet, we had 3 antennas. Our most popular bands were 30 meters for North America. We had a aluminum pole antenna provided by DX Engineering, and then 2 other spider pole antennas, one for 17 and another one for 15. The 15-meter antenna we sometimes modified and used for 12-meter, but we mostly used it for 15 as the propagation yielded more QSOs on those 3 bands. The antennas are pretty good quality. They withstand the weather pretty well, and so we didn't have to make too many repairs. The Radio Shack was pretty simple. You basically just sat on your butt for 2 hours operating time for each operator. That's how long the shifts were. One of the amazing things on Bouvet was the fact that we encountered zero noise. That's pretty impressive, considering that that's very hard to find in our uh, world full of bad quality LED lights or other noise producing equipment. Operating was very nice. The pileups were intense. Uh, the CW pileups were sometimes over 30 kilohertz wide, and the SSB pileups were over 50 kilohertz wide. We had no problem hearing anyone. As I said, has zero noise. But we only had 100 watts because in our first stage, we decided not to bring any amplifiers, and so we operated with 100 watts. And after a few days, when we realized that the weather is not going to get better, and our FT8 equipment was still on the boat, we decided to figure out a way to get the FT8 working without the GPS timing, so that we can make FT8 QSOs in addition to the SW and SSB, so that we cover some very difficult areas of the globe as well. So we had our first 2000 QSOs were made with a clock difference of about 15 seconds. A lot of people figured it out and they were able to get in the log, about 2000 of them. And then we used a satellite phone to figure out where to get the clocking perfect. And so we fixed that after a few days on the island. While we were there, we had a historical QSO. Remember, life on a deserted island is pretty dull, and moments like this bring quite a bit of excitement in the team. It was basically a QSO made between the DXsC entity number 2 and DXsC number 3. That rarely happens because usually it's very hard to put together teams and activate such rare DXpeditions in the same time. But the fellow on Crozet, call sign Fox Tango 8 Whiskey, figure out a way to activate Crozet, and he was there in the campus with the scientists for about 2 months or 3 months. We had a hard time actually making a sked, even though we're very close to each other. That's because the moment we started calling Crozet, we got a lot of these frequency police that would transmit on top of us saying that we were pirates. And so we had a hard time getting the QSO working, and then we had to do a scheduling using our satellite phone. Okay. On Bouvet, as I said, there are no people, but we do have some neighbors. These are very cute penguins. Maybe 20, 30 meters from our camp was a penguin colony, pictured there at the top right. These penguins are very friendly. We stayed away from their corner, and they stayed away from us. They were quite confused about our presence there. One time we left the barrel in their path there, and they got confused on how to go around it. They were quite good at telling the weather. Basically, when you see the penguins heading to the beach from up the cliff, you would know that the weather was getting good. When the penguins are leaving the beach going up the cliff to their colony, you would know that the weather is going to start getting bad. In addition to the penguins, the beach was populated by sea lions, or these were pretty aggressive and very territorial creatures. We attempted and we stayed away from them. And that's one of the reasons we set up camp up the cliff. And this is a place recommended also by the Norwegian Polar Institute, who is in charge of managing the island. The penguins were staying in the colonies to stay warm and also protect their chicks. There were large petrel birds that would pick up the penguin chicks and then drop them off the cliff. The chicks will die, and then the birds would eat the chicks. We found quite a few of these penguin bones throughout the area where our camp was. One of our team members was a bird passionate, and so he told us exactly what why those so many of these bones were all over the place. So as I said, we stayed away from their path. Their camp was full of feces, penguin feces, and when there was no wind on Bouvet, you could feel the stench of those feces. Luckily, in a way, the wind on Bouvet never stopped, so almost never stopped, and so that was not really an issue. So we waited quite a bit for the good weather so that we can go to stage 2 of our stay on Bouvet, and that meant adding more radios, more fuel, more food, more operators. That day, unfortunately, did come only after 10 days. So after 10 days on the island, the captain, who normally gave us the weather report about twice a day, would told us that the weather and the next day will be absolutely exceptional, like so good like it never been since we got there. And so we had two options: either using this incredible good weather window to bring the remaining operators on the island and bring more generators, more radios, and continue staying on the island. But in that case, risking being stuck on the island until the next weather window will show up, or use this opportunity to leave the island safely together with all the equipment and the operators. And so we voted, and 6 operators voted to continue staying on the island, and 6 operators considered it will be unsafe to stay longer. And so it was decided to leave the island after 10 days of operating. To stay on the island longer, we needed a minimum of 8 operators, and so the decision was made to use the next day as a evacuation window. And so 3 o'clock in the morning, we started dismantling the camp so that around 7, 8 o'clock, when the good weather window started, we should be prepared to take advantage fully. The picture on the right was taken as the last 4 people left the island. Was quite a journey, and so after that, it turned out that the exceptionally good weather window that we had that day was the beginning of a very, very large storm. And so the captain said that it's not safe to continue our journey to South Africa, but to stay and hide behind the island and wait the weather. And so we waited for a couple of days until the storm went away, and then we headed for our 10-day journey to Cape Town. It was an uneventful journey home to South Africa, and everyone was really, really excited when they saw the Table Mountain 10 days later. We had a very nice, we were planning to have a very nice dinner on Cape Town. Everybody was excited and wanted to have a big steak and an ice cream. But unfortunately, once we got to Cape Town, we could not get into the port for various reasons. We had to wait another day. It was probably the longest days of our life after being at sea for almost 2 months. We really were looking for that big steak. For our friends in South Africa, ham operators, they welcomed us, and you can see their boat at the top right. We finally got on Cape Town, and some of us lost quite a few of weight by not eating, and also by the rough seas. I'm there at the bottom right after I lost about 30 pounds on this 2 months journey. And the top right, David, excited to finally have a big steak. Probably that steak was bigger than him. Once we got on Cape Town, we also saw this pirate ship, pirate-looking ship, and this is probably where the pirates, all those pirates that gave us a hard time in the pileups, pretending to be 3 Yankee 0 Juliet, but we finally found them and we told the authorities about them. Once we finally got off the ship, everybody was excited and heading for a room at the local hotel. It was an incredible feeling to finally sleep on a bed that doesn't move after 2 months at sea. But we did have to do the unloading. We did hire a lot of some of the locals there to help us put all this equipment into some trucks that will be later loaded into the container, which in turn will travel back to Norway. We had to give away quite a bit of the food and the fuel and some of the items that we did not use. And the locals are very happy, and they forgot about items like customs and so forth. There are quite a bit of statistics listed on our QSL Manager's website, Mike is 0 Oscar X-ray Oscar.com. The statistics show almost 20,000 QSOs, and more importantly, about 8,600 unique stations, which means it's close to 9,000 people around the world got at least a QSO. And although this is not what we wanted, our plan was to make close to 200,000 QSOs, and we only made about 10,000. We're happy that we got on the island, we operated, made almost 9,000 people happy, and we got home safe to tell the story and prepare for other adventures. Europe, actually Asia, Europe was the continent with most of the QSOs, followed by Asia. Was an incredible good propagation towards Asia, and in particular Japan. Although the distance is the longest, we had incredible propagation towards Asia. Our North American friends got in the log as well, although not that many QSOs. But we did work 133 DX entities and quite a few juicy DXs, I should say. And as I said, the uniques almost around 46% of the QSOs. A lot more statistics are available on that website, so if you're curious, feel free to go and check it out. This was probably the most expensive DXpedition ever, and we were able to raise all the money that we needed to go to Bouvet, and that was over $700,000. Although the operators contributed more than $25,000 each, a lot of clubs and companies around the world, and clubs and regular ham operators were donated quite a bit, and so we had the surplus of funds, which we returned to some of the major organizations and clubs. In particular, NCDXF was refunded about $40,000, and The rest went to other major clubs that sponsored us. So a big thank you for all those individuals, clubs, organizations, and also companies that sponsored us with equipment and funds. These type of the expeditions cannot be done if there's no support from the worldwide community. Especially, we didn't have to buy a lot of the equipment, and that was positive. Of all the funds that we spend, almost 80% went to pay for the boat and fuel and the crew. So getting to an entity like this, like Bouvet, is very hard because the biggest expense, the significant expense, is actually a boat that has to take you there, wait for you there, and take you back home. And that's quite a bit long journey. And as I said, almost 2 months. Well, I can talk about this for hours. Our excitement and adventure was very interesting. I think I'll probably it'll be best to give the microphone back to the you guys, and I'm gonna stand by and answer any questions you might have.
Adrian, that was absolutely riveting, and thank you very much indeed for a fantastic presentation, and really gives us some insights into the amount of work and the sheer difficulty that you encountered in making that DXpedition possible. So I'm going to pass the microphone over to whoever wants to ask a question. So feel free to raise your hand in the hand raising part of the screen where your name is, or alternatively wave frantically at me, or unmute yourself and say you've got a question for Adrian. So who wants to go first?
I have a question.
Yes, go on, Russell.
So, hi, Ray. Adrian, thanks very much for your talk. Really, really interesting. I noticed that you were obviously on the south side of the island there, and yet you said that Europe had the best or the most contacts. I'm interested, did the signals sort of go over the island or round, or how did that work?
Well, we did have vertical antennas, so the signals were coming from both directions. The reason Europe, I mean, North America was had propagation windows and directions more or less the same as Europe, and but I guess Europe had openings in both directions. We did
Okay.
have very good pileups from Europe all the time. So yes, both directions.
Okay. I guess I probably ought to look at a great circle map, because it looks like you should be shooting over the island, but I guess it's probably going out sideways.
No, it was definitely going over the island as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no question about it. The angle that we calculated and looked at the forecast showed that the peak that was on the island, the 780-meter peak that's there, would not block Europe at all. Actually, won't block any much direction. That peak was not high enough to have a significant impact.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good luck
Thank
with
you,
any others you do.
Thank you, Russell. Who else has got a question for Adrian? As I say, if I don't see it, yeah, Chris, G8AJM, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Hi, Adrian. Thank you very much. Fascinating to hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak. When I was looking at the closed loop rope system you were using, it just made me wonder how you get some of the heavier stuff on the island. And I'm thinking the generator you had. How did the generator get onto the island?
Well, the same way as everything else. So basically, the closed loop system, for the equipment, we used those barrels.
Yeah.
So which are floating and waterproof, so there was no issue. Then the operators' bags were all waterproof, so there was no issue. Obviously, there was some equipment that was heavier, like the anchors, the tent, and the generator, and these were put in the so-called hyperlone bags These are basically bags that were waterproof, very large bags. So the air trapped in there would flow to the equipment. So the equipment was floating, but at the same time, the um, operators will pull the rope to bring each and every piece of equipment on the shore. Because so in addition to floating, then as the equipment got closer to the shore, the surf would pull the equipment back into the sea. So as soon as the equipment got close to the shore, the operators will pull the bag and try to run away so that the surf doesn't bring it back. We did learn it at a hard lesson when we first, during the first landing, when the Zodiac brought some of the equipment. One of the things, or two things that got lost to sea, were a heavy tent and a heavy bag with anchors for antennas and tents. So basically the operators will pick up the tent, which was on the Zodiac, put it on the shore very close to the cliff, and then go back and bring others, unload the rest of the equipment. But a big wave would come very close to the cliff and actually pulled some of the equipment back into the sea. And obviously, if that happens, you lost it. So the tent and some of the anchors got lost this way. Even though the equipment is incredible, it wasn't pretty heavy. Still, the sea is a lot stronger. But most of the stuff was once you set up the loop system, which is we tested it in Norway last year. So we had it as a backup and knew how to work it, and so basically everything will float more or less.
And had you got a chance to use the larger generators, that presumably they would have gone on a Zodiac, would they, rather than in a
That's
bag?
correct. That's
Yeah.
correct. So we set up our planning was made up of 4 different stages, and they're shown in detail on our website. So the stages were in such a way that if the weather is perfect, then we bring all the generators, all the 12 radios that we had, stations, I should say, through the Zodiac, land it, and then use an A-frame system to lift it up the cliff. If the weather is not as good, then we go down to 8 stations. If that's not acceptable, we go down to 4. If that's not acceptable or the weather's not good enough, then we go down to 2. So we basically ended up using the step with just 2 radios, a minimum amount of other equipment. And so in the end, we couldn't go to the stage number 2 to bring the heavier generators. The weather, when the weather got fine, when the weather was good enough, it was there's already 10 days into the expedition.
Sure. Okay, many thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I've got George, M0URB.
Yes, thanks very much, Adrian. It's a fascinating account of a great adventure, and it's interesting to hear all the details of the logistics that's involved. I was just wondering, you mentioned at the beginning that there's 8 operators who went onto the island. Was that the only? Was these the 8? The only 8 people on the island? And what happened to the other 4? Did they stay on the boat, or did they come after you?
So once we got on the island, and we were hoping that maybe the weather will improve 2 or 3 days later. Instead, we've got a storm, 2 storms while on the island. So the first good weather was after 10 days, which is the day we decided to leave the island. So that day, the weather was excellent. And so 3 of the operators that were on the boat got the chance to step on the island, but did not operate. It basically helped us tear down the tents, the camp, and get back onto get everything back onto the ship. So in total, out of the 12 operators, 11 operators stepped foot on the island, and only 8 out of those operated on the island.
And one person stayed behind on the boat at all the time.
That's correct.
How did they feel?
Well,
I
none
mean,
of us.
to come all that way and then just stay on the boat and not even set foot on the island, let alone operate.
Well, you know, you can't change, you can't fight the weather. So, you know, part of going on the expedition like this is not like going on vacation where you plan everything and everything goes according to plan. You plan it so that you at least get something done if the weather is not good. So obviously they weren't too happy about it, but that doesn't mean, you know, there was anything to do about it. It is what it is.
I can imagine. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Anyone else with a question for Adrian? Wave at me in case I don't see you, or just unmute and pose your question. Darren, is that your hand up?
Yes, yes, sorry. I managed to hear you on all three modes, which I was very, very pleased about, but I didn't manage to work you. I tried very, very hard on SSB. I wonder how many UK stations you did manage to work, because the problem I saw was that the rest of Europe was in our way, so to speak. Also, you mentioned the pirates. There was certainly a lot of pirates around, particularly on FT8. I know you had a time sync problem. And the pirates were easy to spot because they were the ones that were actually on time. But how annoying was it to have so many people, in effect, spoiling it for you?
Well, it was certainly disappointing. We didn't know this for the first couple of days, and then the pilots, you know, updated us on what's going on. In the end, it was disappointing because, first of all, people worked pirates and they thought they worked us. And if they were nice enough not to do a dupe QSO, they were basically not in the log, and that's, you know, obviously very tough on everyone that happened, you know, had this issue. And that's one of the reasons afterwards that the pilots were posting our frequencies every time we would change, or so that people would know which one is the real power, which one is not. And in addition to that, were the QRMers. You know, these are the ones that actually cause more harm because it will slow down our operating. You know, most of the people in our team could easily do, you know, 4, 5, even 6 QSOs a minute. But then when you have to constantly repeat our report, then our speed will go down significantly, and as such, you know, sometimes you would work just 50 QSO an hour, which means that we estimated we could have worked at least 30 to 40% more QSOs if we didn't have these QRMers on our frequency that would prevent people from hearing our responses. Regarding the statistics of the UK stations, I don't know them by heart, but the M0 Oscar X-ray Oscar.com website has a lot of statistics for regions regarding how many QSOs, what type, and so forth. We everyone in the team was able to do or did operate CW. Maybe half of us operated SSB, which was a bit hard with 100 watts. And even though we were able to hear excellent, we had a hard time being heard with these QRMs with 100 watts. And that's one of the reasons we pushed quite a bit on the FT8 as well, to give a chance to the ones that have a very modest setup to get in the log. You know, it was disheartening to hear about all these pirates and QRMers, but I think this is one of the things that we have to get used to. We started thinking of different ways of dealing with this. And CW is a bit easier, but on SSB that makes it more harder to avoid the QRMers.
Would you go again?
Oh, yes.
Good man. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Right, anyone else with a question to George, you got your hand back up again. Go on, I'll let you go.
Sorry, I don't want to monopolize it, but I just wondered, you had this the statistics up right at the end, and you had 6 non-determined QSOs, and I was just wondering what that means. What were they, or in what way were they non-determined?
One more time. I'm sorry.
At the end, you had the statistics up, or how many QSOs in which areas, and there was 6 non-determined QSOs, and I was wondering what that means. What is a non-determined QSO?
Usually this happens when you have call signs like Tango Oscar 5. You're not going to know which one of the French territories it
Okay.
is, or things like
Oh, I
that.
see.
Yeah. Or
Okay, fine.
some people worked us with some special call signs. It's just hard to tell sometimes where countries, or not country, but what entity I should say.
Okay. I understand. Oh, thanks so much. Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks very much for the talk. A big question is, like, I've just done it with a Star Wars special event station, some guy playing back to them and hindering their operation, then been ghosting somewhere else on the frequency. Is there any way that you, as the DXpedition stations, can use as on the cluster as an identifier tools emitters that want to work you guys instead of the pirate? Like, you know, you put in they have a tab, don't they, for the messages at the bottom and stuff. Is there a way you can post like that to help us find you rather than work a ghost station?
Well, 3 things I should say here. First of all, we did not bring the Starlink onto the island. The Starlink internet system stayed on the boat. That was supposed to be brought in the next stage, which unfortunately never came. So we did not have the internet there. So what we did instead, every time we changed bands or operating on one or another, we would use the ICOM satellite radio to tell the pilots to update the Facebook or other media about our frequency. So there was, in a way, one way of people knowing which one is the real station and which one is not. Third, what I would like to add is that this issue caused a lot of interest in the developers around the world to figure out ways to prevent this from happening in the future. And some of the things that I heard are being worked on is, one, the clusters will be used in the future only with authentication. So if somebody posts something there, we know who it is based on the call sign. So that will prevent people from posting bad postings. And secondly, this Starlink will definitely be part of the DXpedition kit. So if there's a system being developed for FT8 right now, WSJT, which was presented at Visalia DX convention a couple of weeks ago. And that's a system that will identify the DXpedition through a specific code or secret code or something like that. More details will be posted soon, but the idea is that it's a system that will allow an operator to know that whoever is transmitting in FT8, it will you know that he or she is the real station and not a pirate by using that secret code that will be posted somehow.
That's brilliant, thank you. Because you wouldn't get that with Fusion or something, because Fusion is assigned to the radio. So the code, you know, when you license register it, so that way you can go around it. That's what these digital systems are, that way proof, aren't they? So it's far better.
Well, the WSJTX development team is testing it. Actually, it was tested in one DXpedition recently, and they will be posting a beta version that will include this particular feature, and that will be distributed around the world so people can use this feature to prevent pirate activity.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Denby Club, for the invite.
You're very welcome, John, and we're very happy to have visitors to our meetings, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. Right, anyone else with a question to Adrian? before I wish him a good evening? No, last chance. I feel like an auctioneer. Adrian, can I thank you indeed very much? And can we show our appreciation to Adrian for his contribution tonight? It was very inspiring, and I'd also like to say thank you to those of you that joined us on YouTube as well. We've been running it live on YouTube as well here on Zoom, and thank you. So I'm going to wish you good night before I forget.
Well,
Adrian,
thank you for having
Adrian,
me.
a very good night to you. It was a superb presentation, and it really captured every element of it, as you explained it from the beginning, and all the work that goes in beforehand, and then the actual journey itself, and then the whole problem of landing on the island. And I mean, I saw some of the pictures that were posted while you were on Bouvet of you in the tent there, and goodness me, you know, I mean, we complain about operating at our desks at home in a nice, comfortable chair. You didn't even have a table and chair to operate from. You were, you know, as we saw in the picture you posted tonight, you know, sitting on the floor in a sleeping bag because it's cold, trying to operate a radio. That, you know, all credit to you, Adrian, and to your fellow operators for an amazing piece of work you did down there. So thanks for coming to tell your story to us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to give you a direct account of our adventure to such a remote place. And well, 73 from New York, and I hope to hear you in the pileups. More DXpeditions coming soon. So looking forward to hear you again.
Yeah, 73 is Adrian. Thank you very much indeed, and a very pleasant tonight to see visitors to the club also appreciating your talk. So thanks again. I'm going to stop the recording now and wish everyone a very pleasant evening.